That is correct. Hi, Ralph.
Hi, Ralph, alcoholic.
Adam, alcoholic. Should I just do a quick recap to catch people up with last week? Um, One of the ways that we went through the book, went with my sponsor and our home group, is 4 highlighters: prayers, promises, warnings, and directions. Chapter 5 is going to start to really show some of those specific directions. The original manuscript of Alcoholics Anonymous in chapter 5, I'm going to go through these 3 pages really quickly. So if you're not taking notes, you can listen to this later. But it originally said, rarely have we seen a person fail that's thoroughly followed our directions. The word directions is also used right after the 10-step promises. And it says, if we have carefully followed directions. It's going to bookend this part of the book with some very, very specific instructions. And as the result of those instructions, a kind of change in perception. I know that when these groups get to this part of the book, we start to lose people. Just to kind of give a fundamental idea of this, when they asked Michelangelo how he made the statue of David, he said, I never made the statue of David. I just chipped away everything that wasn't David. If you start to look at the word rid of as we go through this thing, it's going to talk about the things in me that are blocking me from God, blocking me from my true self, and blocking me from meaningful bilateral relationship with other people. The expectation in each of these areas is going to be looked at in what we call the 7 manifestations of self. Very, very clear. So here's the questions. Have I rarely seen a person fail that's thoroughly followed directions? Do I believe that people that do not recover are people who cannot or will not completely give themselves to this simple program? Am I able to observe that? When you look at people that do not succeed in Alcoholics Anonymous, you will typically see, just like in the second half of Bill's story, what is it they are unwilling to do? You will rarely see people going to meetings regularly, working steps, doing 10, 11, and 12, maintaining commitments, doing H&I work. You will rarely see that guy in untreated alcoholism or worse, drinking again. Just watch it. Be an observer of it. Have I decided I want what these people have? It's a decision. How am I ready to take these proven steps? Very, very important here to start to understand these ideas. Am I incapable of being honest with myself? And that was something that I had to see, that somehow if you look at page 23 to 43, it's asking me to look at the fact that my willpower is insufficient to keep me sober. All the way through on page 60, am I convinced that any life run on self-will can hardly be a success? Have I seen that? If you're new, we have a saying, surrender or be dragged. Have I seen that my life run on self-will, marshaled by the will, is continuing to cause me spiritual pain? Am I willing to relinquish that at this point? Have I tried to live by self-propulsion? It is a specific question. Do I become still demanding or still gracious when I don't get my way? Even though I think I'm somewhat at fault, am I always willing to blame other people for my problems? Have I been the victim of the delusion that I could force satisfaction out of the world if I only manage well? Do I see that I am self-centered rather than God-centered or service-centered? Am I able to see that? Am I driven by 100 forms of fear, self-delusion, self-pity, and self-seeking behavior? And if you cannot see that now, I guarantee you when we're done with the next several exercises, you cannot evade this idea because it will be presented to you. These groups typically get a little smaller when we get to the place where people have to do some writing, but we're going to suggest that maybe what we talk about tonight will be something between tonight and next week that you will do some writing. And I'll do some writing and I'll bring it back and we can even talk about it. So do I believe my troubles are basically of my own making? Do I believe that God can make this possible? Am I willing to be rid of this selfishness? So these fundamental ideas bring us to where we are now, which is at the bottom of page 63, right after we did the 3rd step prayer. And I'll leave you with one last idea if you're new. If you tell a little kid, go in your room and straighten out your room, he doesn't want to do it. If you take that same kid, and you say, go in your room and throw out all your old stuff and we'll buy you brand new stuff, how long would that take that boy? And what I would suggest is to be open-minded on these ideas. Try to see what they're saying here when they talk about selfishness, self-centeredness, and what I'm trying to be rid of, because I'm trying to be rid of these things that are blocking me. And if I can just do that, and again, the last thing is where it says our personal adventures before and after make clear 3 pertinent ideas. After means after I stop drinking. Do I still see this alcoholic mind? Do I still see the unmanageability? Do I still see my inherent need to solve a spiritual problem with a physical solution in part or exhibit B? And then C, do I believe that if I take these proven steps, that I will come to a power that just may solve my problem? So that's where I would leave it, Ralph. You know where we are, right? We're on the second paragraph right after the third step prayer.
Okay. Ralph, alcoholic. And to recap something what Adam was saying, to 60 to 63, the way that Adam read it and the way that we read it is very important for you to try and see that selfishness and self-centered is the problem, that I am the actor trying to run the whole show. All right. Starting at the bottom of 63, it starts to give a timeline. You hear, when should you start this? When should we start step 4? Well, here's the timeline and the reference point anywhere between these 2 points. Next, that's a timeline. We launch down to a vigorous course of action. That vigorous course of action is the rest of the steps 4 through 9. The first step, which is step 4, is a personal house cleaning, which many of us have never attempted. It goes on to explain what we're going to be doing is a fact-finding, fact-facing process. And really, it just comes down to 3 lists, a prayer, and a simple realization. And everyone always says, oh, wait until you get to your 4th step. Ha, ha, ha. You're not going to like it. And it's all, to try and scare people. And I don't know why people do that, because there's nothing to be scared of, and it is not complicated. Adam and I are going to break this down really simple for everyone. And if you haven't done it, these are the directions. It's real simple. It says, though our decision, that's the decision in step 3, was vital. Vital means necessary to life, and a crucial step. It would have little permanent effect unless followed at once by a strenuous effort to face and be rid of these things in ourselves which have been blocking us. Our liquor was but a symptom, so we had to get down to causes and conditions. So it's telling me that I'm going to face and be rid of the things in me that are blocking me from you, blocking me from a higher power, and blocking me from being happy. And so we kind of trick you at the beginning of the book. Okay, yeah, you got an allergy, then we got a mental obsession, then it's, a spiritual malady. Now we're getting ready to tell you the trick that if alcohol is your problem, you're not an alcoholic, because that's what we're going to get into. So it says we had to get down to causes and conditions. And the causes and conditions, these were the things that were causing me to fail in life. The causing me that I was running my show up until the point that I came into the program. When I took an honest look at it, an honest look at myself, I was the problem. It says, therefore, we started upon a personal inventory. This was step 4. A business which takes no regular inventory usually goes broke. Taking a commercial inventory is a fact-finding, fact-facing process. So I'm going to find out some facts about myself, good and bad. And I'm going to face these things. And then I'm going to identify the different parts of self that are affected by these decisions. And there's 7 different ones, which we're going to get into. And if you think about any type of business these days, especially with computers, a lot of times every night they do an inventory update. We have that later on in step 10. But when you take over a business or you move into a place, you want to inventory it. You want to find out what's there, what's good, what's working, what's old, what's out of date, what's spoiled. And if something was spoiled in your refrigerator, you just don't think nothing about it. You don't think, well, maybe I'll hold on to this for a little while. You just want to get rid of it immediately. Adam?
Yeah, when I look at the word rid of, again, it doesn't say face and cope with, face and endure, face and whine about for the rest of my life. To be rid of. The word rid of means to purge. It actually means catharsis if you look up the word. And that word rid of, as it said, we must be rid of this selfishness. No way of getting rid of self. Now it says face and be rid of the things in us that are blocking us. And it's going to use the word again. But what is so important about this, if you're new, is push that word into step 6 and 7. If you start to see it, now it's going to reveal, what am I being entirely ready to let God take? What is it that's blocking me from inventory? What's blocking me from relationships? What's blocking me from peace? What's blocking me from forgiveness? What's blocking me from navigating around the drama, from having some kind of power and direction and spiritual wisdom in my life. And what happens is we're going to start to look at what that is. This concept of inventory, by the way, is very, very important because it's like a supermarket. If you have a shelf in a supermarket that doesn't sell anything, they pull that product off and they put something on there that will sell. So we're starting to look at the things that are causing us pain, that are not serving us. I'm going to start to look at that. My sponsor said, and I will tell you this just as another kind of idea, he said, you can write an autobiography for a 4-step. There's only one problem with that. I already know my story. I know it backwards and forwards. What I was asked to do is to subject some very specific ideas to the process of inventory. And as Ralph said, we're going to look at 7 manifestations of self. And there's a thing called the theater of the lie, where you take 7 chairs and you put them in a circle. Esteem is don't you know who I think I am? Pride is don't you know who I pretend to be? Security is what I need. Ambition is what I want. Personal relationships is my belief about every single role, whether it's a father, mother, brother, sister, dentist, mechanic, employer, girlfriend, boyfriend, male, female, authoritarian. I have a belief system. So if I really start to look at that, what he's going to say here, just as the setup for this, Ralph, is if anything harms, threatens, or interferes with that belief system, I am going to cop an attitude. I am going to withdraw into self. And if you look at it, when we talk about the manifestations of self, I don't think much of myself, but I'm all I ever think about. The conflict here is with my will, if you're new. The function of the mind is to think. The function of the body is to act. The function of the human spirit is will, and my will always choose me. So when you're going to see on the next page here, harms, threatens, or interferes, it is when I don't get my way. I have an idea of the way life should look. And until I can get that down in this inventory and see what those ideas are, what my belief systems are, and challenge those belief systems, I am not going to get free of this. I may do enough to stay sober, but never enough to be really happy. And even more, to be able to have bilateral functional relationships with other human beings where sometimes we just have to relinquish control. You want to have a long-term relationship with somebody, you're going to have to let go of some ideas. That's just been my experience. So, Ralph, do you want to continue?
And those bilateral relationships are what we're striving for. And the other thing was, when you start to identify these people, if you have any types of trouble, as you kind of assign that person, that figure what part of you is under attack, what part of you is to disturb. If it's your girlfriend, maybe it's you want to call yourself Romeo or the lover boy that's affected. If it's somebody that did something to you physically, it's the Rambo part of you that's affected. If it's my money, it's my banking skills that are affected. So we could really break down this individually to help you see that it is definitely a part of a self that's under attack. It goes, one object is to disclose damaged or unsellable goods, to get rid of them promptly without regret. If the owner's business is to be successful, he cannot fool himself about values. And here's the direction. We did exactly the same thing with our lives. We took stock honestly. First, we searched out the flaws in our makeup which caused our failure. Being convinced that self manifests itself in various ways that had defeated us, we considered its common manifestations. This is all highlighted, this bottom part. Resentment is the number one offender. It destroys more alcoholics. From it stems all forms of spiritual disease, for we've not only been mentally and physically ill, we've been spiritually sick. When the spiritual malady is overcome, we straighten out both mentally and physically. It's always the spirit first. We treat the spiritual condition. There's nothing I can do about the allergy. And the mental condition, my mental condition is caused by my spiritual condition. When my spiritual condition is good, the mental obsession doesn't get triggered. Therefore, there will never, ever be the phenomenon of craving. It goes from inside. That's why you hear it's called an inside job. And I heard another speaker say it's like you're a big cylinder. What we did is we're taking everything that's in you, and we're dumping it out, and we're going to clean out the insides. We're going to put the stuff that's good back in. So when life hits you, there's enough inside you. There's enough of God inside you to help you get through these different things. So resentment is the number form. So here's the directions. In dealing with resentments, we set them on paper. There's a direction. See, it's real simple. We listed the people, institution, and principles who we are angry. Column 1, Susan. And what we do is, what I found us do is we pray beforehand. We say a little prayer before column one, and we write down. We write the name. We skip two spaces, and we write the name. We skip two spaces, and we write for 15, 20 minutes, half hour until we're done with that. We give it a little break and we try and go back to it. But we're doing it vertically to get the pen moving, not typing it out or anything like that. Pen to paper. Okay. We listed to people, obviously institutions, the institution of marriages, different principles, IRS, whatever. We asked ourselves, why were we angry? That's column 2. In most cases, we found that, and here's the different forms of self. It was our self-esteem, our pocketbooks, ambitious, our personal relationships, including sex, were hurt or threatened. Some were sore. We were burned up. Okay. And then next to each one of those is what Adam was going over, what we think they should be, what it looks like, my personal relationships, what my girlfriend should act like, or real men should respect me, or what you think of me, or what I think of myself. And it's very detailed, but it's not complicated. And I'm making it more complicated than it is. Adam, you're muted, buddy.
My mic is off. I would dare just at this moment to walk through a couple of these. And this is the way it would look, for example, for me. I resent my employer for exploiting me. That's the cause. My esteem is I'm a good employee. Fear, I'm not good enough. Pride, others should see what a hard worker I am. Fear that I'm lazy. Ambition, I want my employer to treat me fairly in the workplace. Fear, being ripped off. Security, I need a fair day's pay for a fair day's work. Fear would be being exploited. Personal relations, my deep-seated belief about how an employer-employee relationship should look. Employers should treat their employees with fairness. Again, so when I go through it like that, what I do is esteem, pride, security, ambition, personal relations to me change with each resentment. And then I'm asked, have I done the same things? When it says at the bottom of the next page, we realize the people who offended us were also perhaps spiritually sick. Did I ever exploit an employer? All day long. I worked as hard enough to say, don't fire me. They pay me just enough so I don't quit, right? That's the American way. So as I go through these, I will see it. If I resent a friend for gossiping, I'm a closed mouth friend. Others should see that my secret should be held in confidence. I want my friends to keep, my private life private. Fear of looking bad, fear of being exposed, fear of being lied about. So there's a way to walk through this. And what happens is this becomes a working part of my mind. There is a very specific line of thinking here that brings me to a place where suddenly I'm going to get some kind of spiritual relief. When it says resentment is the number one offender and it destroys more alcoholics than anything else, consider this if you're new. I was told resentment destroys more alcoholics than even alcohol. Because what resentment does is I've taken an event from my past, I've attached an emotion to it, consciously or subconsciously, and then I recreate, I reenact, I relive that resentment with every single relationship in my life. So these are the big 5 for me. Abandonment, rejection, betrayal, disrespect, and authority. The abandonment causes me to hold on to things I shouldn't. Rejection means I have the golden handcuffs. I'm never going to try anything new, right? Betrayal, I've got to go through everyone's emails. Disrespect, more people get hurt behind that one than all of them. And authority, I cannot stand being told what to do. Once I start to see these general manifestations, what happens is I start to look at the counter of that. And I start to see how I can slowly retreat from that. And we can get more into detail about this, but this becomes a working part of the mind. If we get this down in this section of the book, 10 and 11 are going to be amazing. Because now you're going to have a working relationship with these ideas where you can be rid of these things very quickly and get back to spiritual center.
And most of all those things that he just were talking about were fear driven. Underneath all those resentments are fear driven. And we got to find out I'm a big guy, like I ain't afraid of nobody. That was my attitude coming in here. But when I came in here, I was self-centered fear. I was driven by 100 forms of fear and everything. And this is how we get to look at that. On our grudge, we set each opposite name our injuries. And here are the 7 ones. Was it our self-esteem, our security, our ambitious, our personal relations, or sex relations which had been interfered with. And sometimes these things are interfered with just in our mind, or not even really happening. But sometimes our mind can be so strong that we make it happen. And the important part of going through this process is covered on page 63. It says, he provided what we need if we kept close to him and performed his work well. This is what we're doing. We're trying to get close to God by getting rid of what's blocking us from God. And in all these cases, it's selfishness and self-centeredness and these fears and these resentments, which make us based on these decisions, based on self, which place us in positions to get hurt. So here it gives a good example. Again, so you'd have Mr. Brown, then you would skip a few lines, and then you'd write the next thing, just in case you have like 4 or 5 resentments against the person. And now we're looking at the third column, and you're looking at, sex relations, self-esteem, fear. You list each one. On the bottom of the 7th one, it shows pride in the example. So it's the 6 up top, and then it's the 7 forms of self, which covering pride. And here's the next direction. He goes, we went back through our lives. So what I do is I start out with the guys, what's keeping you up at night? Who you pissed at right now? And if they're a wise-ass sponsee, they'll say, can I write your name down? Sure, write my name down. Ralph. Why are you mad at me? He's making me do this stupid step work. So we start here and we go back. When we finished, we considered it carefully. The first thing apparent to this world where the people were often quite wrong. To other people were quite wrong. To conclude that others were wrong was as far as most of us ever got. All my life, I was just looking for forgiveness, a little understanding, and a little compassion. That's what I wanted from you. And by the time we get to the bottom of this page, we're going to say, if I'm going to get well, I got to be willing to give a little of this back to you. Adam?
Yeah, let's just give a couple examples just so we can stir it up a little bit. I have a T-shirt over here. I'm not going to pull it out, but it says, Mr. Brown should have got his butt kicked. Now, Mr. Brown is doing 3 things. He's telling his wife he's got a mistress, right? And he's trying to have sex with his wife, which is part of that deal. And then he's trying to get his job. So he's hitting all 3, like the 12 and 12 says, sex, society, and security. He's hitting all 3 right there. Now, if you can't see that in your life, somebody that takes up space in your head rent-free, then, I am very clear on what Mr. Brown is and what he's doing. Mrs. Jones, which if you really look at it, it's kind of like that person that says hello to everybody but you. Mrs. Jones isn't like, it might be that attractive person at the office that always snubs you and ignores you for no reason. It's just one of those things, when we get the hand or someone, kind of like dismisses us, that attitude. Alcoholics hate that. We hate it. So it's like, I got to understand what these things are. It is critical that I understand what principles are. A principle is a core belief that becomes the foundation of my life. An institution might even be marriage. It might be an idea that women are supposed to be subservient. Men are supposed to be, success objects. Men are supposed to pay for everything. Women are, all these belief systems create different types of emotional responses with some of us. And this is what I've learned. Wherever there's hysterics, there's historics. Wherever I have an emotional response, I have history. And this is where the psychotherapeutic approach of Freud starts to manifest itself through Carl Jung here. And he's going to say it, what Ralph just looked at. It says, to conclude that others were wrong is as far as we ever got, right? This powerful piece here where it says that we have to look at it from an entirely different angle. So I'm going to the deepest, darkest, traumatic ideas in my life. And now I'm going to start to look at these things from a different angle. I will suggest this. If you pet a lion and it has a thorn in its side, don't you think that lion would bite you? Absolutely. Every human being has a hidden thorn. And one of the things I found going through this process is that when I start to see that I'm capable of the same behavior that I resent people for, there is something that happens where I start to develop a thing called empathy, then compassion, and eventually a type of forgiveness that relieves me again of the bondage of self. If you look at the 3rd step prayer where it says the word difficulties, if you look at it, it says, and then if you see it right here in Bill, when he's talking about it, notice the difficulties with Mr. Brown, right? It's a very, very same. The word difficulty is the conflict between the way I think things ought to be, my belief system, and the way they actually are. The more disparity between those two ideas, the more internal conflict I'll have as an alcoholic. The perceived self, the projected self, and the actual self, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, it does. And the projected self is self.
Absolutely.
You really got to look at it. And what I've come to believe in my experience is that when we get to the bottom of this page, that when we start to realize is that we're not mad at column 1. We're mad at what the person did in column 2. And then we have to ask ourselves, if I was spiritually sick, am I perhaps capable of doing these things? And sometimes when I'm working with someone, they're having a tough time, articulating certain things, like, and you could just maybe put it like this. Okay, if John was in the 12-step program, he's on your list, and he's in the 12-step program, and he's writing, Ralph in column 1. What is he writing about you? And it gets you to look at it from a different point of view. You follow me?
Very good.
All right. So we fought but the more we fought and tried to have it our way, the worse matters got. Isn't that the truth? As in war, victor only seemed to win. Where moments of triumph were short-lived. I'm going to get her. I'm going to get him, And in our minds, we relive it again, and we think we got them, but in reality, they're out having fun, living their lives, and I'm home drinking my ass off, thinking about it or whatever, reliving it. And each time I relive it, sometimes it gets worse and worse and worse. And here's some direction. Here's some facts about resentments. It is plain that a life which includes deep resentment leads only to futility and unhappiness. And that's a question mark. Do you believe up until this point, up into the material that we've read and covered so far, do you see that resentments are futility and lead to hopelessness? To the precise extent we permit these, do we squander the hours that might have been worthwhile? Question mark. It's like stealing time from yourself when you get caught up in these resentments. But with the alcoholic whose hope is maintenance and growth of a spiritual experience, this business of resentments is infinitely grave. That's 1 time. We found it to be fatal. That's 2 times. For when harboring these such feelings, we shut ourselves off from the sunlight of the spirit. That's 3 times. The insanity of alcohol returns and we drink again. And to us, to drink is to die. That's 4 times. So they may be the dubious luxuries for normal men, but for the alcoholic, these things are poison. So this is a very powerful paragraph. Adam?
One of the ways that I go through this is every single one of these is a warning. What you just read, that entire paragraph are fatal warnings. They're, futility, unhappiness. Do I want to squander the hours that were worthwhile? Is my hope and maintenance of the growth of a spiritual experience? All of these are warnings going through this part of the book. As in war, the victor only seems to win. If you're new, what that means is in war, both sides suffer damage. That's why would I have to make amends to people I've resented? Because I have diminished their life. Even though I can't see it now, what I will see later is that I denied them me because of the resentment. A lot of times they harm me, but that's as far as I ever got. So what I was asked to do is to look at these resentments very differently. There's a big picture that goes along with it. So all the way through this. And then the next paragraph, it says, if we were to live, we had to be free of anger. The grouch and the brainstorm are not for us. One of the things my sponsor said to me, he said, Adam, what do you want from AA? You keep recycling through the rooms every time there's a crisis. And I remember looking at him and I said, well, I want a yacht and a Learjet. And this is what he said. He said, if you work steps 4 through 9 and you consistently live in the discipline of 10, 11, and 12, what you'll get, because I'm a taker, I'm here to get something, he says, what you'll get is a quiet mind and a loving heart. And I remember thinking, what do I want that for? But look at what it is. What is the opposite of the quiet mind? It's the brainstorm. The brainstorm is the mind that won't shut up. It's the mind that's up at 3 a.m. telling me I'm a loser, telling me I don't need to get a job. They're going to do the background check. And the opposite of a loving heart is a vindictive heart. That's the grouch. That's the vindictive heart. And what I've discovered is all of my life I was crucified between 2 thieves. yesterday and tomorrow. And yesterday I have guilt, shame, and remorse. And tomorrow I have fear, anxiety, and worry. And really the product of doing this is eventually I start to get to this place where our spirits are like a body of water. When they're perfectly still, they best reflect the heavens. It's so interesting because if you throw a rock into a still pond of water, it slowly restores itself to its original state. And that is what this is. For many ways, this is an accelerated spiritual journey that restores me to that stillness. And like they say, when that pond is perfectly still, it best reflects the heavens. Then it reflects that which is love. The opposite of resentment, right, is like love. And so that's what I had to do in this piece, is I had to understand that then it says they may be the dubious luxury of normal men, right? The problem with resentment for me is I take poison and I hope the other person dies. It is the manifestation of resentment that causes the greater trouble for me. Some people can just sit with hate and resentment all of their life. They just live like that, and it's a very ugly way to live. But for us, it's poison. It says for the alcoholic, these things are poison. I have to be very, very clear. What is it that's taking up space in my head rent-free? And if you're new, look at your day like a pie chart. Where is the majority of that pie chart? And you'll see with untreated alcoholism, this is where I need a house cleaning. Fair enough?
Fair enough. Could we do a seventh tradition, Matthew?
Hi, I'm Matthew Malkolic again. We are just taking a quick pause just to again announce that we are accepting seventh contributions. Please give what you can. We have posted a PayPal account as well as an e-transfer for ways that you can contribute. Anything that you can contribute is greatly appreciated, and just wanted to bring that to everyone's attention. But now we'll turn it back over to Adam and to Ralph. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys. All right. So just to recap up until this point, we made that third step decision, and then the directions were next we launched this vigorous course of action. And column one was the person, institution, or principle that we are mad at. That's column one. That's the who. What they did and what it affects. Okay, so those are the first three columns. And there's a paragraph here explaining how bad resentments are and that they're fatal and that they could kill, and they do kill. And if you talk to enough people in the programs, you see people, you probably have people in your family that talk about that this happened to them years ago, and you could see it in their face. They're reliving it with you, talking to you again, whether they're alcoholic or not. You know, it talks about anger, being the brainstorm. And the brainstorm, if you look it up in the dictionary from 1937, it's a violent outburst. So that's what they're talking about, that type of stuff. We can't live like that. My neighbor, he could beat his wife, beat his dog, do all kinds of stuff. I can't as an alcoholic. If I do, I'm headed for trouble. So now's the next direction. We turn back to the list, for it held the key to the future. We're prepared to look at it from an entirely different angle. Adam, how do we prepare to look at it from an entirely different angle?
Well, I'm going to be prepared to look at it from a different angle by the next couple of paragraphs. It's going to ask me to disregard this person entirely and start to resolutely look at my own mistakes. We're going to get there, but when it says, I want people to look at the word list. The word list is going to come up several times. Now, why would you burn your 4-step if the book says we turn back to the list, for it holds the key to the future? I'm certainly not going to burn my key to the future. That would be foolish. And I'm not judging anybody that does the big spiritual powwow with the burning of the 4-step and, the prayer and all that stuff. That's all great. But I still got my first 4-step, and I whip that thing out every time I take a guy through inventory, because typically I've got all the elements on there. The 3rd grade teacher, the first, big breakup in middle school, and, a mom that wasn't there and a dad that was too critical. And these things are all the same. What's so interesting about the 4-step, gay, straight, black, white, young, old, they're like invariably the same. I have a belief system. Somebody harms that belief system. I cop an attitude and I get drunk. That's it. It's like just so simple. And what it's going to ask me to do, Ralph, is to start to look at this from a different angle. And when I look at it from a different angle, suddenly a whole world of forgiveness comes to light. And I start to see how to back off a little bit in this area and trust a process and be forgiving that God's kids are all fallible. They all make mistakes. That's such a powerful piece. So I go back to the list. It holds the key to the future. I'm prepared to look at it from a different angle. I began to see the world and its people dominated me. So when I go through this after, and again, this exercise we're doing is to take other people through the steps. I will take, my sponsee, and I will look at his mom, his dad, his brother, his sister, his uncle, his dentist, his employer, and his dentist or whatever it is. And I will go through and I will show them how all those people dominated him by taking up space in his head rent free. I will show them each and every one of these instances, and I will walk them through the next 3 or 4 pages with those names and show them how to get free of it. It is like they said, and I will say one last thing and let Ralph continue. If you go to a haunted house, a really good haunted house, the first time, like I live in Hollywood here, they have good ones where you actually fall through trap doors and goblins drop out of the ceiling. It is so scary. You might, you could pee yourself really bad. The second time you go through that haunted house, you kind of know what to expect. The third time you go through that haunted house, you can see how they built it. By the 4th or 5th time you go through that haunted house, you don't think, you can build the haunted house. So going through inventory with people over and over and over again is one of the most remarkable things. To see how they're blindsided by betrayal, by rejection, by abandonment, by this hope of being loved, and how flawed people are. And you watch the breakdown with every human being, and you see how they start to build a new faith in humanity. This is such a powerful thing. I would say, if you're new, learn this part of the book. And when someone says, "Can you help me?" you'll know exactly what to do. And I believe that a lot of the people that are on here tonight are realizing this isn't working on self. This is getting rid of self so you can actually be of use to others. That's the key to the future for me. Ralph?
Yeah, and it's absolutely true. And from the bottom of that page, it says, we realized that people who wronged us were perhaps spiritually sick. Though we did not like their symptoms, what they did, column 1, the way they disturbed us, they, like ourselves, were sick too. And here's the prayer that we talk about. It says we ask God. Anytime it says ask God is a prayer, we ask God to show us the same tolerance, pity, and patience that we would cheerfully grant a sick friend. When a person offended us, we said to ourselves, "This is a sick man. How could I be helpful to him or her? God, please save me from being angry. Thy will not be done." Now, there's a story in the back of the book, and the lady talks about how she gets rid of resentments, how she got rid of all her resentments except one, and she prayed for the person for 2 weeks and the resentment went away. And that is not what our literature says. It's great, and it might work for some people to pray for them, but this is clearly not what our literature says. Our literature says we ask God to show us. Not that I pray for John, I pray for this person, I pray for this person who harmed us. And this prayer is a very important prayer that I was told to pray for each resentment. On the list, I'm going to say this prayer. Each person that I think that harmed me, because it's important that you pray for them before we take the next step, where we're going to try and ask somebody to look for our mistake in the matter. Because sometimes there's been people that really were hurt. Sometimes people might have been molested, or people might have been really hurt financially or screwed, where maybe you didn't have any role in it. And we're not going to try and ask you to look for a mistake in something without praying for the person first. So I have my sponsees, if they have 100 names on them, they pray 100 times for each one of these people before taking them through. It says, we avoid retaliation or an argument. We wouldn't treat sick people that way. That's hard to do, but not when you're spiritually fit. If we do, if is a condition, clarifying, if we do this, we destroy our chance of being helpful. We cannot be helpful to all people, but at least God will show us how to take a kindly and tolerant view of everyone. And here's the direction. Referring to the list again, putting our minds to wrongs others had done, we resolutely look for our own mistake. And if you have it opened up like this, a binder, a regular notebook opened up like this, what you could do is you could just take the paper like this and go like this. So now all you got is the name, their name, and you're going to list over here. You're going to take away column 2 and column 3 out of the matter. You're not even looking at those anymore. Putting our minds to the wrongs had done, we resolutely look for our own mistake. Where had Ralph been selfish, dishonest, self-seeking, or frightened? I'm upset that my girlfriend cheated on me. You know, Kyle, that's my girlfriend cheated. My girlfriend, she cheated on me. What it affects is easy to figure out. Now, when I get to this question, I would ask, where have you been selfish? Well, I cheated on her too. Or, well, I kept spending all the rent money. Or, well, could be I drove her crazy. I didn't show her enough attention. By the time we get to this column, we just write, and the way we do it, we write a short little blurb, enough to jog my memory. So when I'm working with a sponsor, when I'm working with my sponsor, he could spell it out for me. But we don't write it out long, just little blurbs, like 5 or 6 words, 7 words. And then column 5 is going to be the exact defect. Adam?
Yeah, I do it very similarly. I know there's some variations on the way that people do the 4-step. I do column 1, 2, 3 in a list, and then on the back of that same piece of paper, okay, I am starting with, we realize that people who offended us were also perhaps spiritually sick. Now, the only way I can prove that statement is to ask this question. If I resent someone for gossiping, did I ever gossip? If I resent someone for stealing, did I ever steal from them and or others? Stealing is different. It's not just stealing money. I may diminish a human being by emotionally trapping them. I may diminish a human being by staying in a relationship or a job or a function too long. You see, there's a lot of ways to steal a human. The most valuable thing any human will have in their life is their time. Stealing someone's time. So then it says the symptoms, and like ourselves, we're sick too. To prove that statement, I'm taking every one of the resentments. I'm asking if I'm capable of that behavior. And then going down to where we are now, referring back to the list again, okay? Putting out of the mind's wrongs others done. I'm looking at selfishness differently. I look at selfishness as an attitude. I can do whatever I want and not pay the consequences. You hurt me, I'm going to hurt you. I look at the dishonesty as the lies I tell myself. So if I resent my dad for abandoning me, right? When I look at that, did I ever abandon my dad? I abandoned everyone I loved behind alcohol. I abandoned anyone that I cared about by my own self-centeredness. I don't even need to drink to be selfish. But then the lie I told myself to hate my father was that his love for me should have been more powerful than his spiritual disease. You see, I have to back up that resentment with a lie. That's the only way I can maintain it. So what I'm doing now is, in this part of the book, I'm resolutely looking for these ideas. How do I paint the red flags green? Oh, I met her in rehab. I can't believe she drank. You don't think that's delusional? I knew he was a crackhead. Can't believe he stole my iPhone. It's like, if I really look at how I make decisions based on self that later leave me in a position to be hurt, the book says invariably I made a decision based on self. So what's going to happen now in this part of the 4-step is I'm going to be challenged to see how in each of these areas of my life, because I chose to dance with most of these people, except for my mom and my dad, who were, familial. Most of the other people I chose to dance with one way or the other, either as an employer, as a relationship, right? And I have to take responsibility for that. And it's going to ask me in this piece. It says the inventory was ours, not the other man's. Where were we to blame, right? We saw our faults and we listed them. These are going to be the 6 and 7 ideas here. When I go through 6 and 7 with another human being, I know we're out of time. Maybe we should just open this up for questions now and then reread this paragraph next week. If I were you guys, I can maybe leave you with a website that I use for the 4-step. Maybe write 2 or 3 and then play around with them. And then when we get to this section next week, I'll talk about it. The website is, I could just write it, but I don't know if that's advertising, but I'll put it in the chat box. Do you want to open it up for questions?
Yeah, it's easy to remember. It's the jaywalker.com, right? The Jaywalker.
That's the one I've been using, and I really like it. I was in Akron, Ohio with a bunch of old guys, and they all said that they had 50, 60 years sober, these guys. They were doing a 4-step workshop, and they were all doing the extended 3rd and 4th column. And he goes, Sonny, we've been doing this since the 40s. And I was like, wow, I didn't know that it could be as definite as that. So, yeah, I'll put it in the box. And then if you guys have any questions, let's do that.
Yeah.
Suzanne, would you like to ask a question?
Yes. The part where they talk about, we're supposed to treat people that kind of, were mean to us like they're sick and be loving and all that. That's kind of a big, thing to do. That's kind of a lot to swallow.
Right.
So there's people out there that have deliberately done things to me just because they didn't like me, or, where I didn't really, maybe I did have something to do with it, but I mean, where it was just some mean stuff. And for me to, I mean, how do you do that? Some of that's kind of going to be kind of difficult for me to do with certain people. That's all I'm trying to say. Isn't there another way where I can just say to heck with them?
Of course.
And, thy will be done or something like that, Thank you.
Yeah. I'll Ralph, you can answer, but I will say that I agree with you that there are some relationships that are so dysfunctional, some trauma that is so seemingly unforgivable. But what I've had to do is look at it from a different angle so that I can be rid of the resentment in me. Resentment is like an acid. It only eats the container it's in. It doesn't mean that I re-engage in a spiritually sick relationship and jump back in the lion's mouth. That would be foolish. I have a lot of friends that have severely abusive family relationships, and they've had to just step out of that. But they still have to do the healing, because if you don't heal what cuts you, you'll bleed over other people the rest of your life. And I have to heal that. And this was a big part of that. But I understand what you're saying. Ralph, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I was thinking, maybe you could go over the second paragraph in page 62 where it really talks about that, because someone could really hurt you once, but then after they hurt you once, if this is a repeated value, we didn't do something to let it happen again and again and again. Adam, do you want to tell the Reader's Digest version of the gorilla in the cave?
No, I don't want to offend people. That's more of a step one idea, though.
Yeah.
Ralph's referring to a little AA humor. If you have sex with a gorilla, it's not over till the gorilla says it's over. But that's more of the manifestation of the allergy. It could definitely be refilling an injury, though. I agree with you.
Okay.
But a lot of terrible things happen to good people. The problem is we relive it, recreate it in our lives for decades. My first resentment, I think, on my 4-step was my 3rd grade teacher. I was holding on to that for 30 years. Mm-hmm. If I take a resentment even into tomorrow now, I have not done 10 and 11. I have not really trusted God to take it away from me. If I'm even bringing it into the next day, what would it really be like to have a quiet mind, to really be able to let some of this go? You can't change the past, right?
Yeah. Wendy? No.
Yeah. Wendy, alcoholic. So I was one of those victims of molestation when I was younger, and my dad has been on my 4-step list, and he was, it was easy to use that as continuing to drink, and because poor me, poor me. But I've been sober a long time now, and I try to do is look at my part of carrying that anger, carrying that victim role, but the people I work with will say, well, you can't, that's not possible. That's not possible to have that part because you were a victim. True, I was a victim. But it all gets kind of confusing, though. I sometimes I don't know how to do that when I'm working with people.
Right. I agree with you. I've had the same trouble, but again, to refeel it for the rest of my life, like I said, the acid is in me. It's like an acid in a container. I cannot change those horrible events from my past. But if I continue to refeel them and recreate them and relive them in my life, what happens is I suffer. I suffer for the rest of my life. I'm done suffering. For me, I had to be rid of it. I had to let it go. Part of that was to realize these people are very, very sick. The lens they're looking through their life. And this is what my good friend said to me. He said that had happened to him as a child. And this is what he said. Somewhere further down the line in inventory, he realized that those people, those perpetrators, had taken them as far away from God's grace as they were. And it was such a powerful statement. Because if you look at God's grace as a quiet mind, a loving heart, having peace, having love, having integrity, having a sense of safety, these things that are part of this connection, that I'm allowing by continuing to relive that in some way, that to take me further down that road. Do I have a responsibility at some point to let that go? I don't know. I did. I let it go. I can't change the horrible things that happen. Like a lot of terrible things happen to good people. With me, a lot of it was violence, and I had to let it go. I've also realized there's a lot of good people in this world. There's a lot of kind people, and I'm gonna let those people in my life, because what I did for the first half is I just kept recreating it with the same dysfunctional people over and over again. You know what I mean? Right? I could find them with a blindfold. If there were 99 healthy people and one spiritually sick one, I could find that person with a blindfold. But when I healed through this, that became less attractive to me. If that makes any sense. Ralph, I don't know. These are tough questions. This is going to come up every time we go to inventory.
This is why I wanted to clarify the top, bottom of 66 and top of 67. It's very important that we go to prayer before we start to look for our own mistakes with this. And the biggest success that I've had is having guys who were 36, 38, 42 years old, living with the guilt of some of the stuff that happened to them, go from a mindset of being a victim to a survivor and getting that freedom. And the freedom comes with forgiving this person who did this. Now, there's a big difference. When we forgive them, it doesn't mean we condone the behavior or anything like that. We just don't let what happened when he was 10 or 6 or 5 years old control what's happening to him now. And there's been some other times where we started to look at that, and he started to get filled with resentment. So why didn't I do anything about this when I was 16? Why didn't I tell my guidance counselor? Why didn't I seek help earlier? And the fact of the matter is you didn't. You're sitting at my dining room table now. We're exposing it probably for the first time. You're talking about it, and it gives the pathway to freedom is drawing closer to your higher power. And part of that is forgiving people who've done these things. And it's a process. And sometimes it'll pop up in your head again. You have to ask God for, to help you in this matter. Again, it just becomes a pattern. But it's a very important part of this 4th step is to asking God to show you exactly what's here. The same tolerance, pity, and patience we would cheerfully grant a sick pen. When a person offended us, we said to ourselves, this is a sick man. How could I be helpful? So it's a very, very important part before you move on. And I have my sponsees say it for each one of their prayers. Next.
Lynn, alcoholic. I was sent an unmute, so I guess I'm next. Sorry, my phone is now deciding for me whether I'm on camera or not. So it's decided no tonight. I was wondering 2 things. One is on the sick man's prayer. Is there any way to strike a balance between coming at it from a place of holier than thou, like you're praying for somebody, and that puts you sort of on a spiritual high top, rather than being at a place of one among many type of thing. And then the second one was I got a new sponsor in COVID, and I'm doing the 4th step in a much more thoroughly for the first time, and I kind of had this sense in the back of my head that, oh, wow, I'm really having insights about like where I really thought they were in the wrong and I'm, this nice person, and where in the past I kind of stepped on their toes in different ways and they retaliated over time, but not in a flagrant way. Anyway, I'm starting to see these things. I'm making some breakthroughs, and I have this sense that I'm going to get through the fourth and the fifth. And because I've recognized these things in myself, I will no longer have these resentments. That didn't exactly happen. So, I mean, in some ways it got better, but the resentment does keep coming back. I don't know if that says something about me or what. Thanks.
Ralph, do you want to do that, or shall I?
Yeah, go ahead, Adam.
My experience with that is twofold. One is, we have a saying in AA: if you got a halo, don't let it choke you. I've worked with a lot of and myself, this puritanical idea, like somehow I become the parking sheriff in my neighborhood. There's certain things that I find intolerable. And what's so interesting about it, my experience now is that the more people I've taken through inventory, we say if there's a name for it, someone else has done it. If there's a law against it, a lot of people have done it. I've seen people just break down and be so ashamed and so really repentant at what they've done in their past. And when you start to see that, it's very interesting. You don't see a lot of sociopaths in AA. I think my experience is that I've become very compassionate. I haven't become holier than thou, like you said. I could a little bit, but I think every one of us realizes we have an Achilles heel. It might be different, the defect that we get high on our defects, right? For someone, it might be gambling. For another person, it could be food. I know people that run out to nightclubs right before closing and pick up, drunk people. I've seen it all. Everything, 22 years and then being around for 17 years before that, you will see every manifestation of spiritual illness, trying to solve a spiritual problem with a physical solution known to man. And as I start to see that, I see the pain. I see the shame that people have in step 6 and 7, and I can't not be compassionate to them, because they're here because they want to get better. They're here because they really do want, people don't come back here if they don't want to change. But if they don't change, eventually their sobriety date will. And I know we're running out of time. The host has been very gracious to stay with us with this. Should we just answer a couple quick ones after this? Ralph, did you have anything else to say on that?
No, just the same thing. That I think that why I've become effective, or I think I am, I've stayed sober for almost 20 years, is that I share about a lot of my stuff that I've gone through. And I am not the same person that walked through the room almost 20 years ago. So I do that for two reasons. I do it because it helps the other person feel comfortable about saying their truth, about not holding anything back. And for two, it always keeps it green for me too. So I definitely agree with Adam. And it talks about that at the bottom of page 18, no holier than thou, to do just a sincere desire to be helpful. Right. And that's the best suited to be most effective. And that's what we're trying to do here. I don't judge anyone. I don't think I'm better than anyone. I'm trying to give somebody a hand any way we could. A couple of quick ones. Michelle?
Hi, I'm Michelle. I'm an alcoholic. Thanks, guys. You guys are awesome. Oprah Winfrey has an awesome forgiveness quote, and it goes something like, forgiveness is giving up the hope that, the past could have been any different. And Adam, you speak so well to that. Your heart is really amazing. Like when you said to Wendy, am I supposed to do this? Well, I don't know, but I did it and it worked. And that's pretty awesome. I have one quick question on the page with the chart on it, 65. Adam, you mentioned something about the 7 somethings, but you talk so fast. What was that?
7 aspects of self. That also is on the website. Esteem is how I see myself. Pride is who I pretend to be. Security is what I need. Ambition is what I want, right? Personal relations is my belief system. But going back to Carl Jung, ideas, attitudes, and beliefs that are once the guiding force. Okay. Sex relations is not sex in that it is my manhood for me. So in other words, if a guy pulls up at a red light and says, "What's up?" I'm going to jump out of my car. Anytime my manhood is threatened, there is something in me that just goes for the throat. I don't know what that is. Like maybe it was my dad telling me that men don't cry and men fight, but that manifestation there, and for a lady, it might be something different. It might be
Maybe motherhood.
Does that make sense to you?
Yes, it does. Is
Okay,
there a
so-
place I can find that?
Yeah, they're all on page 65, and on the bottom of 65 is the last one, pride.
Okay, thank
Pride
you.
leads the procession, by the way, because it's the one that defends our social, like, don't you know who I pretend to be, right? If you
You're all in there, you walk the
my
page.
persona, the actor, yeah. So I think you get it.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Two more quick ones, and I guess we probably got to go.
Hi, everybody. I'm Carol. I'm an alcoholic.
Hi, Carol.
Hi, if I don't drink or die 2 months from today, I'll have 33 years. You know, I had to work through those issues of abuse too. And my sponsor told me to pray to see these people or situation as God does. And, you know, I had to realize that they only knew what they were taught. Some people, it was a power thing, but, you know, when I had to pray, my father was raised in the Depression. He was born in 1929. He was on the street working at 7 years. And, you know, I had to realize that the abuse I received was probably less than what he received. And it says, forgive us as we forgive them. And stuff creeps in and, you know, but it's where that deepest, darkest secret of my past is my greatest possession. I share it and it doesn't hurt so bad. But I visualize, like take a pillowcase or a backpack and put a heavy rock in for each one. And I'm carrying that around. Or, you know, when I went to the gym and that creeps up, I realized that I am bringing them into my workout and it's making it worse. And so I have to leave them out, you know, or make believe they're a little Teddy Graham and hang them by their ankle from a telephone pole or something. But I'm hurting me, but I have to realize that, you know, they probably had it worse. And I got to see that, but because my sister did a behavior with her kids, that was what we were taught. And I saw the automatic reaction.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Fred, let's finish with you.
Okay, thank you so much for the great meeting. I just wanted to mention that, you know, my question is kind of like Lynn's, but taking it a couple of steps further. Went through step 4 and step 5, shared my resentments and all the things in step 4 with my sponsor and my higher power. Now I'm on step 6, and then once I finish and get on step 7 and do that, I'm worried that after all that happens, that I'll still have those resentments still hanging around, and I still get mad at the guy that cuts me off on the freeway, and I still get jealous, or, you know, my ego steps in. And I just want to know, how do you deal with that? Because that seems like failure.
It's a process. 6 and 7 are a process. What happens, it's almost like this. I hate to use this analogy, but I live in a pretty nice neighborhood, see my neighbors every day. If suddenly I found out one of my neighbors was a bank robber, and, you know, every day he goes out and robs banks, I could never look at him the same. One of the things that happens in the 4th and 5th step is admission, acknowledgement with another human being, and an eventual process of acceptance. 6 and 7 slowly become things that 6 is things that are causing me pain. 7 is not doing things that are blocking me from freedom. As I start to become aware of that, I start to look at the counter. Like where there's pride, I see humility. Where there's anger, I see temperance. Where there's lust, I see chastity. Where there's greed, I see charity. Okay? So what I'm starting to do is where there's selfishness, selflessness, dishonesty, honesty, resentment, love, purity, fear, I start to look at the counter. I cannot change the defect, but I can start to change the behavior. It is a slow process. You will never let somebody in on the freeway and carry that with you for the next 10 miles. But if you cut somebody off or you do not let them in, you will hold on to that. There's spiritual laws. Tell me, Fred, I'm not telling the truth. My experience with this is if I just behave a certain way, my life works better. It doesn't have to be that deep.
Thank you.
Thank you, buddy. Thank you. Thank you.